this discussion concerning the 2023 Glendale, Village of Glendale Strategic Plan. We have, as most of you may know, the last strategic plan we did was in the year 2000, and I and council really felt like we needed a new one. Things have changed in the village, and the residents have changed in the village, and maybe they have different ideas. So we decided on embarking on a strategic plan, and then we felt like this is not in our wheelhouse. This is not our oh, okay, what? Okay, is this better? Okay, sorry about that. So this is not something we do all the time. I think a lot of us have been through strategic plans before, but the idea of actually trying to run one and create one seemed a little bit out of our range. So we did put out for bid, seeking a consultant who would help us with this. And we were fortunate to find a company called Envision. We actually got 2 bidders on it. And we chose Envision for a number of reasons that I'm going to share with you, just give you a little credibility check here. For one thing, they're an Ohio company, and the other company was not, and it is nice to just have them a little closer. Number 2, we put down a list of key issues, key things that we wanted to cover in this strategic plan, and they responded to each and every one of them in some detail, showing some background experience on it, and we found that very helpful. Finally, making them near and dear to the hearts of our financial people, they said they had a good deal of experience in and success in getting grants for villages and cities for whom they had worked. Oh, and I guess I forgot to mention, they were the low bidder. Let me just introduce you to representatives of Envision, who will be actually walking us through this process tonight. The principal product manager is Emil Lizniansky. He has an 18-year career in urban planning and brings to it a rather unique perspective in a couple of ways. Number one, he's a lawyer. No booze, please. And number 2, he's an engineer. So that combination, I don't know how he keeps it straight in his head, but he does, and it gives him a perspective. He has his law degree from the Cleveland Marshall College of Law, and a master's in urban planning, and a bachelor's in civil engineering from civil engineering from University of Akron. His colleague, Tom Muller, is his numbers guy, and financial, that is, and he has 43 years of experience in Ohio city management. They've worked for growing communities like Mason and nice stable ones like Glendale and, in this case, Madeira. He's worked on projects like street improvements, water, stormwater management, and public budgeting and municipal finance. He has his associate. He's an associate adjunct professor of public budgeting and finance at the University of Cincinnati, where he also graduated, and Xavier University. So these 2 gentlemen are just really, I think, top notch. They are obviously very well educated and experienced in that. They did, however, fail to include one item in their biography that is important when you're doing business in Cincinnati. So maybe as they go forward, they'll tell us where they went to high school.
Thank you for the intro, Mayor. Unfortunately, I went to high school up in rural Medina County in Northeast Ohio, so not a school you'd ever hear of. But Tom is a local Cincinnati boy here, so if that means anything to you all. We appreciate great turnout tonight this evening. When we talk about comprehensive planning, strategic planning, it's really about getting community input and feedback. So it's great to see a full house here. I'm going to be brief with my remarks. If you grabbed an agenda on the way in, I'm going to step through that here and then really serve as an orientation to the different activities here. This isn't a consultant-driven process. This isn't top-down administration shoving ideas down your throat. We want to hear feedback from you all. So I please encourage you to participate in these different activities. We'll explain each of them, but there's opportunities to voice your opinions on different questions here. And then there's also some open-ended questions on these whiteboards where if we didn't capture something, we want you to share any ideas you have to make this a better community. So starting off here with our agenda, before you leave, please do sign in at the back corner there, just so we have you on record. That helps us when we try to go get funding for projects and support from different regional and state, federal partners, because it shows we had people here. We're not going to sell your IDs or info. We're just trying to show that people did show up, and we'll take some pictures to prove that. But it really does help our chances of securing funding and getting those partnerships. So if you turn to the back of your the side that says strategic plan overview. So the village, as the mayor said, is preparing a new strategic plan. The last one, it's been about 20 years. This is a document that'll guide the village in all its municipal decision-making, from regulations, things like land use controls, zoning, to capital investments and programming, staffing levels, services, utilities, parks and recreation, all things that the village has some role in. To guide this process, the village nominated a steering committee of stakeholders from different neighborhoods, residents, different backgrounds, and as well as business owners in the community to help guide us. And we've already had a couple meetings, as you can see in that flow chart, in late May and August of that committee. So where you see us right now is PF, Public Forum number 1, early October 2023. We're getting close to the midpoint of this process, and this is our first of 2 public forums that we're scoped to conduct. In the months ahead, there's going to be a few more opportunities beyond tonight to get involved and in more detail. But tonight's feedback, what we hear from you all tonight, will help shape those input activities so we ask more detailed questions and start to develop some concepts as consultants for you to react to. One of the things we're going to have is a community survey, and that will go out to everybody who couldn't make it here in person tonight. That'll be online. It'll be available in print. We're going to get the word out through social media, through the website, through newsletters, through grassroots advocacy. And we already have some steering committee members and community members who've come into meetings volunteer to spread the word amongst people they know. So we want everyone to take that survey, and you will hear a lot about it in the coming month. We're also going to have some focus group meetings, and we wanted to bring in the whole community first before we decide exactly what those focus group topics are. You'll see some different themes as you go through these boards, and I'll step through that in detail in a moment, but that gives you kind of a precursor of what those focus groups might be, but we're looking for your input tonight to see what's most important to you, and if we're missing anything, if there's some other ideas, which again points to those whiteboards for some open-ended input. That'll happen later this fall. And then we will have a second public forum where we'll actually have some concepts on boards, maps, priorities based on what we've heard from the steering committee, from the public at large, from the administration, for you to react to, a draft summary of our plan document. And that'll be a chance for you to say, did we get it, or are we a little bit off? Do we need to course correct? That'll happen early winter 2024. And this is scoped to be a 10-month process, so we started late May. We'll be ending, hopefully, earlier than March, but at latest by March of 2024. Just to touch on some initial themes from our first couple steering committee meetings, those are at the bottom there. Administrative, how the city, or the village, governs, and are there more efficient ways to govern is one of the topics. Civic engagements come up quite a bit, just how do we communicate with our residents and our business owners and our stakeholders. Village finance has been probably the key point, and as we go through these boards, I'm going to have Tom say a few words about municipal finance. That's really his background, and he brings 4 decades of experience leading village and city budgets for communities in Southwest Ohio that are very similar and face some of the same struggles, having a limited tax base and understanding that when we have this wish list of items, services, capital improvements we'd like to see, we have to find a way to pay for that. So that means making some tough decisions about priorities and how do we fund these things. So we'll step through that in a moment, but that's a key part of this exercise. Land usage, obviously we're a historic village, so in many places things are going to remain as they have always been. But we have a couple properties, particularly the landmark property on the east end of town by I-75 that we have a board dedicated to the far right. And that's an opportunity for you all to say, what would you like to see there in terms of future private development? What do you think is appropriate for the community? And how might that increase the tax base so that we lessen the tax base burden on residents like yourselves? Infrastructure, something that's come up. Obviously, some of this is just pave the roads, fix the potholes, but we also have some very unique things like gas lamps, where we've heard a lot of different opinions on those, and that's been an interesting discussion. And then it's also some quality of life enhancements, things like green space, bike paths, and people have all sorts of different opinions on that, so there'll be some opportunities there on the boards for you to give some feedback there. And last but not least, parks and recreation speaks to the high quality of life that you all have here. And should we enhance certain green spaces like the southern beltway kind of on the edge of town, or should we leave them be? Those are things we're looking for feedback on. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of step us through these exercises. You can start it in any order here, and there's a big group, so I'm sure people will kind of filter where they feel appropriate, but I will step through here in a linear progression. I'm going to use the mic so I can figure out how to use this. Okay. Working? No. Let's see. Working? No. Working? Testing? All right. It's just a little slow. Blame it on the Wi-Fi. All right. So first board here is a very general board that starts off with, are you a resident of the village of Glendale? Yes or no? And I realize some people would say, why does a non-resident have a say here? We have business owners, we have community stakeholders, regional partners, and if someone's coming to a meeting like this to share their input, we still want to capture that because they're likely spending money here and maybe investing in the village and the tax base. Bottom, simple question here. Which of the following would you most like for the village of Glendale to invest in? So this is a pick one, single pin. Infrastructure, parks and rec, aesthetic appeal and programming, so we mean kind of events, and services and communications. Very general, high-level question. We'll get into some details as we go to these next two boards. We are asking you to place 2 pins, up to 2 pins, in your top choices for aesthetic appeal and programming. Same for services and communications. Top 2 for infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure, transportation, utilities, those kind of capital projects. And then parks and recreation here at the bottom. And it's okay to, if it's not a priority for you, none is always an option. We're not forcing anything on you. After you've kind of seen those options and looked through some of these very detailed recommendations as far as ideas that came from our steering committee, we realize, and we've heard feedback already, those aren't all the things that the community might want. So we're having 2 open whiteboards here to, we ask that you use Post-its rather than having to erase because we want to capture this, we want to take pictures, we want to record everything we hear. So please use a Post-it and some pens to write down on this board any services or programs that you'd be interested in that you didn't see over there. Similarly, going over to the next whiteboard, other ideas for capital projects on this one. We have some Post-its and pens. And I'm going to pass the baton here to Tom to talk a little bit about this municipal revenue board.
Thank you, Emil. It's still on? So to address Mayor Lofty and where I went to high school, I went to Roger Bacon High School. So I actually grew up with several gentlemen who grew up in the village of Glendale. In fact, I'm going to be seeing them on tomorrow night and Saturday night because we have our 50th high school reunion. So as I'm very familiar with the village. I spent quite a bit of time during my high school and college days. So the municipal revenue portion of this, obviously, if you have capital projects, programs and services or that you want to fund, there may be additional revenue that's necessary for that, and there are several options for that. Can be either voted upon by the the city legislature, village legislature, the city council, or the state legislature, or you as voters. So the options here aren't necessarily all tax related, but private development of the landmark property. So in other words, there's additional tax base that could be generated from that development, and you're going to be asked what kind of development you might want to see on that. The second would be an additional property tax levy. I know the property taxes are the primary source of revenue now for the village, and in this circumstance, there may be some additional levies that you want to support for those kinds of projects. An earnings tax. A lot of communities in Southwest Ohio, have what is called an earnings tax. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as an income tax, and that's a misnomer. Income tax and earnings tax are sometimes interchangeably. That's not the case. An income tax, by legal definition, is based on your Ohio adjusted gross, so the level that you pay to the state of Ohio. Communities in Ohio are not permitted to have an income tax. They are permitted to have what is called an earnings tax, or some people might even call it a wage tax, and that is strictly on what you earn in your employment. So it's on your W-2, the box that you check. I think it's 18. That is what you pay an earnings tax on. It can also be on net profits for businesses within the community. I'll use Madeira because that's the one I'm most familiar with most recently. And we even taxed, so if you owned rental property in the community, if you had a profit on that rental property, you paid 1% of that profit. Now, if you had deductions or you took a loss on it, then you didn't pay anything. And the same thing holds true with net profits in businesses. It's only on the net profits, not on the gross revenue or gross profits for the entity. Now, some of you may say, Muller, you're incorrect, because there are two communities in Ohio that actually do have an income tax. They are grandfathered by the state of Ohio, and that's Indian Hill and Wyoming. So if you have friends in either of those two, you know that they pay an income tax, and they pay it on their Ohio adjusted gross, but they were grandfathered in. The state legislature said, no, we don't want communities doing that. We want them to do it on an earnings tax and an earnings tax only. So the village can pass an earnings tax by legislation, by ordinance, to levy up to 1%. And anything over 1% has to be voted upon. So that's the difference between an earnings tax and an income tax. So if you run into those definitions, you'll know the difference between the two. So that's something that's being discussed as part of the strategic plan. The next thing here was establishing a village charter and cementing, I'll use that word, the home rule of the village. So right now it's a statutory form of government. It operates under the state of Ohio. But a village can and a city can pass a charter which establishes its own constitution and establish the way it's governed. So that's something that's being considered as part of the strategic plan. That might be something that you might think is a priority. And then the last box down here, like the others, is that no additional programs or services are needed in that situation. Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's a terrific question, and I'll only answer it from my perspective as a former city manager who worked under a council manager charter government for both Mason and Madeira. Home rule provides much more autonomy for the community. They don't have to follow all of the state laws that that are in place for what is called a statutory form of government. Now, some people might think that that's okay, that the state does a good job of saying how a community can operate and how it's governed and how it's set up with its administration, and they may feel that's fine. But other communities have said, no, we want to deviate from that. We want to have our own governance. So as I said, it's really a matter of policy. It's a matter of preference for the community. And communities, will change all the time. I was just involved with St. Bernard here recently, and they're going to modify their charter to go to a city administrator form of government, or they're at least thinking about it. Let's put it that way. They haven't put it to the vote of the people yet, but that's something that they're looking to do, as opposed to having a safety service director who works for the mayor. So as I said, it's a matter of policy and local perspective as to what they feel is most important for the governance.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. I'm going to move here to our last and final board. So this one here is for future land use. And again, you are a community that's built out except this 90-acre landmark property. And it's outlined here on this little aerial, but basically the vacant property on the east edge of town by I-75. And we asked the input on any type of land use that you feel is acceptable there in the future. We show commercial, so think of retail, services, restaurants in the traditional suburban formats. Light industrial, and when we light, we're not talking about smokestacks. We're talking about very sleek, modern buildings that might host advanced manufacturing, things like that, things that you see in a modern industrial park. Mixed use, for something more walkable, retail, entertainment, likely with residential or perhaps office, which is more challenging, on upper floors. So you're kind of like your smaller scale maybe of something you'd see at Liberty Center, something more like that. Multifamily residential, basically apartments, pretty straightforward. Townhomes, these would be single family homes that are connected together, kind of like your modern row housing. Senior living, we have heard a lot of concerns from the committee and some of the members of the public who've stepped into meetings about aging in place and having a place for our seniors. Single family detached, which is residential, which is obviously the dominant form of development pattern within Glendale currently. And obviously a choice is no development desired. With that, those are our 5 activity boards and our 2 whiteboards. We do encourage you to step through and take time to get your thoughts on there. We will be there to help guide you through these exercises. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and I think, so first of all, I do want to, this is 90 acres, so you're very likely to have multiple, you might, if you're pro-development, you might say, yeah, 3 or 4 things might seem appropriate to me. So 90 acres is unlikely to be just one thing. But from your question now, as far as municipal tax base, usually light or corporate office would be your most beneficial. Commercial can definitely help, but you're going to have more requirements of your safety services, that type of thing. Where a light industrial park, there's some fire considerations, things like that, but generally that more than pays for itself, as does office. Now we know office is challenging post-COVID, and I can tell you right now, there's a lot of clients of ours that are they're studying how to fill buildings that were vibrant. So that's why we're not really highlighting office here. If we can get it, that's great. But where we're making something light industrial, that's much more viable and feasible in this market. So, sure. So she asked if there was a type of land use there that was most beneficial as far as to the village's bottom line, municipal revenue, as far as the tax base. And we said light industrial and corporate office are generally the most beneficial. Yes. Correct. It is privately owned, and it's a very lucrative development parcel. But again, this is not something the village would sell to somebody, but they do have the opportunity to zone and control land usage through zoning. So that's their mechanism to control that site. So that's why we're asking for input. But yes, it is not village property. And to be frank, I don't think the village could afford it. Yes, sir.
How do you reconcile these future land use options with what's happening in well, not mixed use was a great idea. We all supported that. But Tri-County, they've got a plan to develop the same thing. So it really would make sense to be competing. So which of these, in light of what's going on in the area, would make the most sense?
Well, that's something we would consider, and certainly when we think about scale, again, there might be a mixed-use element within a corporate industrial park, or a little bit of mixed use up by the interchange where you know you're going to get some people. We would really be looking around and seeing how much of the 90 acres would be appropriate for certain. All right, I don't like that, so we're going to try to go here to the podium. The other thing here is, again, we're trying to get some qualitative input tonight, and we'll really go back to the drawing board. You know, we'll talk to developers as part of this process. We've had developers even ask about this, you know, this parcel, knowing what we're doing. I'd say residential in this market's probably always going to be the most viable for a good bulk of it, but there's obviously a lot of interest with the Aero Hub and this corridor for light industrial. So those are two that kind of jump to the top of the list. And yes, commercial bricks and mortar retail is challenging, but anytime you're getting successful retail in this market, it seems to have some mixed use element. So the rooftops help support it. So I would expect a combination of uses to be what we lay out here, but we're looking for input to see, do you guys just object to certain things? Is this consistent with the community character, what you'd like to see? The market piece, you know, will run some cold hard numbers, and there may be a scenario where everybody wants something and we have to report back that that might be a tough one. Let's see how we can scale that or modify slightly. You're correct on, you are correct. There is no earnings tax in Glendale, and that would be a consideration, you know, as we zone that. That's something, you know, administration will have to think about, and we will show those numbers both ways. But generally, commercial property is more valuable than residential property for tax purposes. So obviously the residences here are nice and they're highly valued, so they're all productive. But there's less of a drain on resources generally with those commercial services. Absolutely. And again, yeah, no, and that's kind of the details of a next step would be for us to take this very high level input and say, okay, let's develop a couple scenario plans where we show out some land usages. And yes, I anticipate, but we'll let residents in that area speak, that they would want some type of buffering. Now, obviously, there's ways where you could have residential adjacent to residential, to new residential, which then increases to a higher density, some type of commercial, you know, and there's ways to kind of gradually increase that density. So there's a lot of different ways, and there's traditional buffers, mounding trees, planting. Those are all details that we'd probably share at the next meeting. Correct. That would be part of the fiscal impact analysis with that piece, absolutely. Mayor?
I just got a question from somebody in the audience that I thought I would share with the rest of the group here. And otherwise, I don't intend to do a lot of talking at this meeting. But the question was, do we get to keep the income tax from the, that comes in from our county tax bill? And the answer is we get 27% of that tax bill. So when you pay your taxes, the rest of it goes to the county, to the school system, et cetera, and all the other things, and the village gets 27% of that. What did I say? Property tax, sorry.
Yes, sir.
I have a question just as it relates to that historic part of this, the landmark land. I'm not sure how much you guys know or understand about the historic preservation of Glendale and what that land means up there. I mean, there's two markers up there, the Eliza House and Tucker Station, that's really significant to those of Glendale. And so I was wondering if there's been any thoughts or consideration about that land and two big houses that are up there that played a real significant role in the Underground Railroad going all the way back to 1830. So there is some development going on there. There's sort of this, in the village of Glendale, we have this pocket of significant history, and then we have development. So I was wondering if you guys were aware of the historic preservation piece of this while this development is being talked about. How do we preserve our history as a central station for the Underground Railroad, and the only planned community in the United States. So I think I want to throw that in there while we're talking development, because that's another part of who we are that maybe some thought could be given to. How do we do that and still bring significance to what's already there and been there for 2 centuries?
Yeah, great comment, and that has come up in the steering committee, and we do have a historic preservation consultant actually on the steering committee who's a community member that has a lot of expertise with that in cultural tourism and historic tourism. So I think those are assets that we want to market, that we want to help tell the story and draw people into an existing, town center district. So I'd certainly encourage any thoughts like that to please post them up there so we capture them.
Well, I attended the two meetings that you had before, and I brought that to the meetings. But I was wondering why, what your process was of arriving at what you arrived at, because I think I brought we did the SWOT analysis. I thought there was both strength and opportunities that we had with the ideas that I shared, and share them again at the next meeting. So I thought for public input, we would at least see the list of the things that we felt were significant to the growth and even the revenue aspect of the village.
Well, we're here tonight to get additional input. So we are going to be having a detailed community survey, like I said, that's going to come out later this year, and we're going to have focus groups. So those two things are influenced by things we hear tonight. This was.
So if I write those things on here, then they will be seen in the next iteration, or will that process, is the process such that where it began, community input, that there isn't a place where the land, like, it could get eliminated for some reason?
Well, I don't think it's something that we'd eliminate, but how much we emphasize it in the plan, whether that's a bullet, a paragraph, pages of, of strategy, I think is based on collectively the group. Just because one person says it, I don't want to say it becomes an area of emphasis. So,
Yeah, I just felt that, going to those meetings that were important. I thought you were looking for, in the SWOT analysis, for content that you felt was important. So I'm just saying that as the process of how do we land on what's most important or least important, and is there a process by which the committee decides, what's important and what's
And that's what we're working through as we go through this. And I do think those opportunities were highlighted in the SWOT analysis and memorialized. So I don't think it's something that's forgotten. It's something that's come up and we did talk about.
Underground railroad sites on this landmark property. Okay, so that was not articulated in this land use usage, that they may be disrupted. So I think that is information that was not put in here or articulated. So I think that is information that should have been prepared in here. So I think that is important to some people on how this is utilized or how it can be used. So saying that it was talked about in this group, the strategy group or the special group that talked about it with the SWOT analysis. But when you're talking here, I'm new to the area, I'm new to this community, but that is a very important thing for me to keep that type of cultural, historical alive. And I might be voting on demoing the whole area to make it, because I'm very much in the business. But if later I find out that that was there and that would have been destroyed, that would make me very sick. I'd be very upset. So the thing is, I think that type of stuff does need to be made transparent with everything. I don't like things not being transparent. So I think you got to be very careful about the transparency of what's done in a group. I've done strategic planning with multinational organizations. I know how this works. You got to be transparent up and down the chain. And with a group like this in Glendale, what I've seen is this community talks. They know each other. It's very transparent. You need to make sure things are transparent up and down, because some people know it and know that someone doesn't. Very shortly, they will know it. And you will lose this group very quickly. And I'm new to this. I'm new to this community. Am I wrong? Okay. So I'm just giving you a heads up. This is how this community works. And I've only been here since November.
Appreciate it.
I thought you had said that the information you get is smaller meaning. You have that, and tonight was to get new information on information that might not have occurred then.
Correct.
That not been, so this is for new information. You already have a lot of information. So you'll be putting those two bundles of information together.
Correct. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the first question was about the significance of the Underground Railroad, our cultural history here, and are there opportunities to tell that story, make that part of future development, and really make that a draw into our community, recognize it, and build around it.
Yeah, and the concern is that seems like it's sort of been pushed to the side, and I just want to try to make it's bigger than all of this stuff, and it's under this historic significance. Whether we embrace it as a community or not, it still doesn't change that these events happen, and they're very important to not just the history of Glendale, but national history. So, and I'm saying that as a person who has spent the last 8 years focused on that as a historian, and pulling all that information out all the way back to area beaches go. So I think that the village may not be aware of any of this, and I think that it's important in this plan that there is something intentional about how we go about doing that, and not just a couple people who decide it's important or not important.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to let you elaborate, but basically what I hear you saying is you do not generate any data, you're collecting the data that we generate. So the onus is on us if something is important to us, we need to make sure that it's on the board, correct?
Yes. Qualitative things. We have assessment that we do. We look at socio-demographic factors. We look at things on maps. But if it's personally something you care about, yes, please mark it here so we understand that collectively this is something of importance. So land usage, the steering committee felt that history went into the land usage theme. Given that most of our land is historic and it cannot be altered, basically, so that's where that would sit. Why, there's been no talk about doing anything to lose that certification. I mean,
That would have absolutely no impact on the village's certification. The question was, would changing the city's governance, changing the way the city operates, would that have an impact on its historic status? And the answer to that is no. There would be no change in that whatsoever.
Yes, ma'am. She had a question about the charter process.
So the question was, what is the charter process? And so the city charter, if the village, or the village charter in this situation, if the village decided to go with its own constitution, that is voted on by the residents. Typically what happens, and this is actually a process that is established by the state legislature, is that the village forms a charter committee to study the various forms of government: strong mayor form of government, village council manager form of government, or some hybrid of that particular type. It would determine who is elected and who is appointed. And so right now the state of Ohio says in a statutory form of government, there are certain positions that are elected, and that doesn't change. But if you have a charter form of government, some of those positions might be appointed as professionals as opposed to elected positions. So that's all established by the village charter. And the charter committee establishes what goes to the voters for final approval. And then the residents decide, is that the form of government they want or not? And if they decide not, then it goes right back to the statutory form of government. So it is a community-driven process. The residents drive the process because they vote on the charter. It really wouldn't have any impact on converting land use. I'm sorry, the question was, does it have an impact on, does the change of governance or creating a village charter, does that have an impact on land use? And the answer to that, again, would be no, because you still are going to have a village council. The village council establishes zoning and development regulations, so that's all still going to be rooted in the policy aspect of the village and the policies created by the village council. So that won't change, and there won't be any impact in that regard. Does that help you? Okay. All right. I'm not sure I understand. And Mayor, you might be able to help me with this. So the question was, and this is in regard to the 90 acres and how the community has currently controlled it as far as zoning is concerned. So it's it's currently zoned, correct? Yeah, okay.
The property is currently zoned residential. It's a combination of 1 acre and I believe 1/3 acre lots, depending upon where you are on the property. When you go further north, you get into the 1/3 acre lots. That is the current zoning. And going to a charter doesn't change that because you still need council to approve any change in zoning. We did have an overlay, which is a different form of zoning on the property, but that has expired and it is no longer in effect.
Is that historic designation or is that non-historic by landmark?
Give me the question again, the question?
Is the landmark property within the historic designated area?
No, it is not.
Other questions before we break out? We really want to have you have time to get through these activities because this is important for us to memorialize this. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. In this strategic plan overview, I know you guys prioritize things. Is the infrastructure and the water issues that we're having, is that a high priority for this strategic plan?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Can you hear? In this strategic plan overview, you've got all these issues of how you're going to help this community. Is the water issues that we experience, is that a high priority?
So the gentleman's question was the water issues, is that a high priority? We're looking for input on that tonight, how important that is to you. So when you look at the infrastructure board closest to the left of that whiteboard, it's going to ask about some different improvements. There is one that talks about water, so I would indicate that there. And if it's not covered, what you're looking for, please write it down on the capital projects with the post-it.
I asked this question because of the CMOM that has been associated with our water issues. That was in 2021, we had loans that were submitted, or application that were submitted for the Ohio EPA, the DEFA loan for design and planning. We were awarded some money in February of 2021, and we never heard anything else about the use of this money for the CMOM. Now, I say that only to say that we've never had any reports put out for the public to see, to keep track of the progress on this project. Now, the CMOM is a capacity management, operations, and maintenance program, which is a long-going program to keep track of the progress in rectifying the problems that we have. If anybody wants to see any of those documents that should be made public documents so we could track them, because the Village of Glendale gives monthly reports of its progress, you can get on eDocs, and the code that you would need would be 1PB00012.
Would you like me to answer your question regarding the CMOM status?
No, I was just...
Well,
addressing them. I didn't.
I spoke with Aim. I'll take the answer to that.
You usually don't reply to me. So
Well, the CMOM project, as Mr. Parrish referenced, has been discussed at length at multiple utilities committee meetings and council meetings, and the $90,000 loan that the village secured has been expended towards engineering services to solve the CMOM project. So it is being addressed. Thank you.
is there a reason why you guys don't post those reports so that the public would be more familiar with what's going on with the project?
Information about the CMOM project is available on our website under Building Glendale's Future.
all for coming out. This has been great, great turnout here, and I can see we've got a lot of opinions to look at. However, we're going to start putting on our fuzzy slippers in a few moments, and be ready to go. So if anybody is ready to leave, we invite you to do so. I believe the Friendly Stop and the Cock and Bull are still open.